Outskirts of Addis Ababa, thousands of servers work on solving complex mathematical challenges that'll be rewarded with bitcoins.
Zero. I will just now to think.
This mining is energy intensive. Here, they're using surplus electricity from Ethiopia's dams.
The Bitcoin mining has a great advantage, the capability to consume huge amount of energy, to deploy fast and to do it very close to the source, like for example here near the substation. After many years, when the distribution grid deployed, other industries come, probably the power will be redistributed.
Ethiopia's recently inaugurated Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD, will more than double the country's electricity output.
But Ethiopia doesn't yet have the distribution network to take this power to the half of the population that doesn't have electricity. The idea is that the fees paid by the Bitcoin miners to use the surplus energy, some $220 million worth in the last 12 months, will go towards funding the expansion of the grid.
The government had a target of 2030 for universal access to electricity, but now says meeting that will be extremely challenging.
Until the people have full access and the economy start to consume all this power, we are using Bitcoin for transition. It's not a permanent endeavor.
So they're not getting preference over domestic industry?
No way. Yeah, no way.
The cost of mining one Bitcoin in Ethiopia is about $20,000, when hardware, staffing and other costs added along with the cheap electricity. But that Bitcoin then sells for around $114,000 at current prices.
It's very profitable because 80% of the operating expenses for a Bitcoin miner is related to electricity. And in parts of the European Union, they're looking at 15 or 20 cents kilowatt hour. So to come to Ethiopia and get 3 cents or sub 4 cents, I think is extremely lucrative. We'll see.
For now, the price of Bitcoin is climbing and has become less volatile. As more countries, notably the US, become more receptive to digital assets like Bitcoin, then Ethiopia's appeal as a crypto mining hub is likely to grow. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Addis Ababa.
Happy Bitcoin Tuesday, freaks. It's your host, Odell, here for another Citadel Dispatch, the interactive live show focused on actionable Bitcoin and freedom tech discussion. As always, Dispatch is brought to you without ads or sponsors. It is supported by viewers like you sending Bitcoin donations to the show. All relevant links are at citadeldispatch.com. The largest zap we got last week was from Ride or Die Freak Trazyn. That's Trazyn. And they said, oh, I lost it. Thanks again for the awesome rip. Cheers. I'm glad you found it helpful. The easiest way to support the show is through your favorite Nostr app. I'm particularly fond of Primal. I've been helping build it out. You can search Primal in your favorite app store and simply search Citadel. Freaks, we have a great show lined up today. We'll be talking about the Fedimint open source project. I got two prolific Fedimint contributors here today. We have Justin. How's it going, Justin?
Hello. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you. And we have Brad. What's going on, Brad?
Hey, thanks for having us. This will be fun.
Cheers to that. So I mean, we've talked. I've had a couple shows on Fedimint very early on, and I've had many shows relatively recently on Cashu. Both Cashu and Fedimint, to the freaks that are not aware, share the same overarching principle of using chaumian ecash with Bitcoin. But then there are significant differences in actual implementation. So I think an interesting place to start is just in general, and you guys have made a lot of progress, which is, I think, why it's important that we're having this show. And also, last but not least, just for people to be clear, there is a venture-backed company called Fedi, which plans to open source their front-end client for Fedimint, which is a open source project that is not VC-backed and is available to the public as free use software that you can use any client as the front end for. But anyway, I think a great place to start here is why should people care about Fedimint? Why does the project matter?
Yeah, sure. I can start with that. So I think Fedimint offers a nice set of trade-offs for like using Bitcoin, different from what maybe other projects have. Doesn't replace, on-chain self-custody Bitcoin, or even probably running your own Lightning node, but it does offer like a really easy and private option for holding and spending Bitcoin. And that's kind of down to the, like you mentioned, the chaumian ecash part. And then also integrating with Lightning, because it's important. Like Lightning is kind of the glue for the rest of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and Lightning's already pretty private too. So yeah, I think it's just a nice set of trade-offs.
Yeah, definitely echo all that Justin just said there. Maybe zooming out a touch, I bet a lot of freaks have some knowledge on chaumian ecash mints. I may hand off this conversation to some folks that are not so well versed in the history of chaumian ecash mints. The way to think about it in a nutshell, and why would you want to engage with one of these systems, is you have this system that you can deposit funds into. You can send Bitcoin to, in the case of Fedimint, multi-sig wallet, and then you can do some cool stuff. You might get some ecash notes that don't have an account identifier. They're simply notes with a denomination that you can swap out. And you can swap those notes out for either another on-chain payments or a payment over the Lightning Network. And if that's interesting to you, then the system might actually be pretty interesting to you in general. And then one of the biggest differences between something like Cashu and Fedimint is that Cashu took a beautiful approach for simplicity, a single server that doesn't have to concern itself with a bunch of consensus mechanisms of how do you figure out, like, what is the state of the blockchain? Like, what is the state of my internal database? Where Fedimint tries to distribute that. That's the federated part of the Fedimint. It splits that across multiple peers, sometimes referred to as guardians. And then you have the ability to tolerate some faults. So let's say one server goes down and you have 3 out of 4 total servers running, the federation just continues. We could go into a lot of those guts there, but yeah, at a high level, that's kind of how I like to think about the system.
Yeah, I mean, it also means I like the idea of thinking about it as fault tolerance. I mean, a lot of people think about it from a point of like rug pull resistance from like a malicious actor. But in these types of systems, it doesn't even have to be a malicious actor, right? It could just be someone's server went down or they messed up backups or something to that effect, which is actually probably much more common in the space.
Yeah.
Right?
The upgrade case is the most common, right? We're upgrading the software and you want to be able to upgrade with no downtime. And yeah, with the federation sort of built in, you can do that very, very easily. Just upgrade one node at a time.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about when chaumian ecash in general, whether it's Fedimint or Cashu, I mean, I think we're going to be diving into like deep technical specifics, but the cool part to me is that from a user point of view, it is actually, it can be, and it's already close to being the easiest way to use Bitcoin in a very powerful way. It's programmable, it's offline, it's seamless, it can be seamless UX, and it has strong privacy guarantees. And historically, when you look at trying to get the most amount of users to use something in a private way or a freedom-oriented way, it doesn't really matter how many podcasts you do or tweets you send or education you try and do. What really gets more users using technology in more powerful ways is when it's the easier, cheaper option. And we've seen the project I always highlight is Signal. And the reason my 90-plus-year-old grandmother is sending encrypted messages with me is because it's a seamless, easy way for her to get baby pictures. She's not thinking about any of the technical specifics. It's just a pretty app that works and is reliable and is easy to use. And when I think about onboarding the next billion people onto Bitcoin or something, and you want them to use it in a powerful, freedom-oriented way, we're going to need something like that. And I think chaumian ecash plays a key part here. It'll probably be a combination between Cashu and Fedimint. I will say Cashu has had a lot more momentum lately, but you guys have seemed to have been really putting the work in. So I want to really dive into what has gotten done on the Fedimint side. But real quick, the other big differentiation, since we're like kind of starting off the bat with differentiations between Cashu and Fedimint, is Cashu made a very distinct decision early on to kind of be Lightning native, while Fedimint is it's like built on top. And I'm a little over my skis here, so I'm going to need your guys' help here. But it's to me, it's like it's on-chain native with like Lightning gateways. Can we talk about that difference in like how does that affect things in practice?
Sure. I'd love to dive into the on-chain side and then maybe hand it off to Justin for the Lightning Gateway side.
Awesome.
Sweet. So when you set up a federation, let's just use the canonical example of a 3 out of 4 federation. So when I say 3 out of 4, that means that it only requires 3 of the 4 members to continue operating in order for everything to run smoothly. But when you do this initial setup DKG distributed key generation, you get a bunch of different private key material that gets generated. Part of this setup process will generate a pay-to-witness script hash threshold where you say 3 out of 4 of these keys need to be combined in order to move funds on chain. And so you have this static descriptor that's like, hey, this is the descriptor for this federation. So
it's basically an on-chain multisig, right?
It's an on-chain. Yeah, that's a fancy way to say it's just an on-chain multisig. The canonical example is 3 out of 4. You could have 5 out of 7. It continues to scale. But it's really just that in a nutshell. So funds do get sent into this multisig. We don't have a ton of time to turn this into a Bology style podcast. Jules, I'd love to dive into.
Please no.
Yeah, I'm happy to if folks want to, and if you want to skip your haircut, Matt, but totally understand if you don't. But in a nutshell, it's really cool how you do a deposit on chain. I'll just do a quick tangent into there. You say, oh, that's the descriptor for this federation. I would love to send some funds into this federation, but I'm not going to just send it to that address. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tweak that. I'm going to generate another key pair on my side as a client. And then I'm going to tweak their descriptor using this public key. And then I'm going to go ahead and send funds to this address that's been tweaked. So the federation actually has no clue that this address exists because it's just a tweaked descriptor using some crazy random private key, public key pair. And then once the client observes, oh, cool, my funds have been sent on chain, I want to prove to the federation that I actually sent those funds and I would love some ecash in return. So the client does this all on your behalf. It monitors the chain and it's like, sweet, my funds showed up at this address that I generated. Let me go ahead and construct a proof to the federation that says, take a look at this Fedimint transaction. This is my claim that I tweaked your descriptor using this key pair. I'm actually going to sign this Fedimint transaction with the private key used in this key pair. Therefore, you can verify like the signature, make sure the tweak all matches. And if that all works, go ahead and give me some ecash, please. So that's the, like, in a nutshell, how a deposit works within Fedimint. So yeah, that's completely on-chain native. And then it's a much more simple process in order to do a withdrawal, where you just say, hey, I got some ecash. Would you please satisfy an on-chain transaction that sends to this address that I'm requesting? And as long as it's valid ecash, you're good to go. So I'll pause. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, from my correct me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, this choice of making it on-chain native, to me, adds a lot of user benefit. It makes it easier to load the wallet at first. It makes it easier to withdraw if you want to leave, right? Because we see from let's just use a standard, users buying Bitcoin on Coinbase. They have on-chain Bitcoin. It's like, how do they get it into something that is Lightning only, right? Which is what Cashu is. So they first need to find some kind of intermediary wallet. I mean, I guess Coinbase might offer withdrawals on Lightning now, but a lot of places don't.
Yeah.
And you don't know if there'll be liquidity. So then first they have to get into a Lightning wallet, and then they have to do that. And then on the reverse, when they're leaving, when they want to leave a mint, they need to make sure that they have somewhere they can send it that has inbound Lightning liquidity from that mint operator, which is easier said than done. At small amounts, it works pretty well, but there's a lot of UX headache that happens there. So you have the benefits to the user by going on-chain native, but then from a protocol operator standpoint, it adds a ton of complexity, right? Like that's the trade-off, basically.
Hey, what are my coins and what coins am I going to use to satisfy this withdrawal request? Now we have consensus that's like, oh, shoot, your view of the wallet looks different than my view of the wallet. Yeah,
well, Cashu is just like you're just like running a Lightning node.
Yeah.
It's like relatively straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on the Lightning side for Fedimint, basically the decision comes down to like the on-chain part is sort of complex enough with, like Brad said, making sure the consensus is working between all the nodes. If you were to sort of like make that Lightning native, you would have to essentially build like a federated Lightning node, which I think there's been sort of some interest in doing, but it's really hard, right? You essentially have to put all that, like the Lightning logic into a federation, which is difficult. So I don't want to say that like Fedimint's not Lightning native. It's just not, like you said, the backing of the mint. The backing of the mint is always the on-chain like multi-sig. So the approach that we took, or that Eric took in the beginning, was essentially the Lightning support is kind of an extension. You can think of like Fedimint's as like these gateways that provide the Lightning functionality as an extension to the Lightning network. So the gateway is kind of like the last hop in if you're sending like an HTLC. So these gateways will essentially do the translation. They'll do swaps essentially. Say you're sending some ecash out of a federation. You will at first lock up some ecash in an outgoing contract. And you can think of this contract like an HTLC. It has a hash, and you can claim that ecash with a pre-image, and it also has a timeout. And so then essentially you tell a gateway, hey, gateway, you can have this ecash as long as you pay this Lightning invoice for me. And that process is atomic. Essentially, once the gateway pays the invoice, it comes back and gets the ecash for that outgoing contract to get paid. So as far as the trust model goes, the gateways don't have to be trusted. It's like essentially the same thing, or very similar to running a Lightning node. But the gateways do have to trust the federation because you're obviously dealing in ecash at that point. And so the gateway needs to trust the federation, not to rug it as well.
And the gateway doesn't have to be one of the guardians. It doesn't have to be one of the Fedimint operators.
Correct. And you can actually, as a gateway, you can connect to multiple federations. And so we do some shortcuts where, say you're a gateway and you're connected to two different federations. If you want to pay from one federation to the other, the gateway actually won't even do the payment over the Lightning network, and will instead just do an ecash swap.
They're basically like a bridge at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the original dream was that basically gateway operators would be, a relative free market, that you'd have like multiple gateways for each Fedimint. Is that still in play, or?
Yeah, the tricky point you get into is that gateways kind of provide like the quality of service for the Lightning
Yeah.
payments. And so you run into this scenario where if you have like a truly like, oh, anyone can provide like liquidity for the Lightning network, you have this attack where someone would just like a very bad Lightning node, connects, and then all of a sudden
It's like a denial of service attack. Like the users are trying to send a Lightning payment or receive a Lightning payment and continues to fail because you're sitting there as a non-functional gateway.
Yeah. So we have a concept of like vetted gateways where anyone can run one, but in order to get sort of like approved by the Federation, the Guardian members will vet you and say, hey, we think that this gate will provide a good quality of service.
And how does that work in practice?
Just the operators need to get in touch to. It's just like a setting, a config setting, essentially.
And so what, like a user's client, when a user's sending or receiving a Lightning payment, they're not like choosing a gateway. The app is automatically choosing for them?
Yeah, correct. The app can make sort of some, right now it's not exposed as far as like when you're sending a Lightning payment.
Got it.
We can talk a little bit later, but we have a new Fedimint wallet that we launched on Friday, actually.
That was my next question.
And we expose it through there. We don't let users choose yet, but we show like, here are the gateways that are connected and here's their Lightning node and here's what fees they charge and things like that.
Okay, so let's talk about this wallet first. And then we'll start with the user side, right? Like the user facing stuff. And then I want to kind of dive into what it looks like currently from like the Fedimint operator side and like what their software stack looks like and what that burden looks like.
Yeah.
So what is this wallet that you launched?
Yeah. So we're calling it the ecash app.
Really creative name.
Shout out to Justin Moon on that. That was his idea. But yeah, it's a Fedimint wallet. We have Lightning, on-chain, and like full ecash support, so you can kind of choose which way you interact with payments. Let's see what else. We have Lightning address. It's only for Android right now, so you can go to either Zap Store or ecash.love to download it. Is our domain.
Oh, ecash.love is a great domain name for like a non-top tier suffix.
Yeah. So we have all that. We tried to integrate some Nostr features. So we have Nostr Wallet Connect. We have NIP87. So that's like that's Cashu as well, where you can use Nostr to like discover federations. There's kind of this problem when you first download the app.
Is that the rating thing?
The ratings part of it. We don't have ratings in there yet. That's we'd like to add that, but we use the announcement part where you're kind of announcing like, hey, this is a federation you can join.
Like that's what the front end for it. That's bitcoinmints.com, right? Is NIP87?
I believe so. Yeah.
So it's like a discovery mechanism. These are the mints available, and then ideally you're also doing kind of like a web of trust. Odell likes this Fedimint.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have the recommendations in there yet, but I think that's a cool idea. And it's kind of, it's the way of sort of bootstrapping it. If you download it, you don't have a federation to join, you can join one of those.
I mean, that's one of the biggest UX hurdles is, I've talked about this in the past. I just had Eggy on, Cashu contributor, working on CDK and npub.cash. And like the biggest hurdle is the app providers, I respect it, don't want to pick a mint for you. So like every user's first question is like, what do I choose?
Right.
Which mint do I pick? And so trying to mitigate that without defaulting to like one big mint is will probably always be a problem, but we can smooth it out.
We can make it a little bit better. Yeah. And in the app, we have things like you can view the UTXOs because everything's on chain. So we have like links to, if you try to join a federation, it'll give you a little preview and it'll show you how many guardians there are. And then
that's cool.
Where the UTXOs are on the blockchain. probably talk about. So we also have a backup recovery, which is kind of it's built into the Fedimint protocol, and then our app supports it as well. So we have like a pretty familiar like BIP39 like seed phrase that all your ecash is derived from. So you just it's kind of a nice experience. I mean, you save the seed phrase and then you can use that to get your ecash back. The one caveat is at least at the Fedimint protocol layer, you need to remember like which mints you've joined, because your ecash is specific to a particular mint. But for what we did in the app is that we actually encrypt that information and save it as a replaceable event on Nostr. So we essentially derive a Nostr key from your seed backup, encrypt which mints you joined, save it to Nostr, and then can retrieve that information later when you enter your seed phrase. So it gives like a nice experience where you just enter your seed phrase and then all your ecash comes back immediately. Yeah, so we have that.
The alternative is you'd be needing to run like an additional server to be able to do that kind of functionality, right?
Or just like remember, oh, my ecash is with Bitcoin principles or whatever, and then you'd have to like manually recover that way. This is just kind of a nice little shortcut. And yeah, I mentioned a few of the other nerdy sort of like Fedimint specific features. We have the UTXOs of the Federation, the gateways, so you can kind of view the gateways for each federation. And then we also have like a note breakdown. I don't know how many like ecash wallets in general expose that, but like in all ecash is like fixed denomination notes, right? And it's similar to
it's like a paper wallet.
Right. And it's similar to kind of like a UTXO as far as when you make a payment, the wallet is sort of doing like node selection, like analogous to coin selection. So we expose that. We expose a view. We don't expose like node selection yet. That'd be something we maybe want to add at some point.
I mean, why would the user even need that?
Just as a convenience. One feature we'd want to maybe add is like having the ability to like print, just in general in Fedimint, like print paper ecash.
Got it.
And if you have to like, you kind of have to like reverse engineer the algorithm if you want to know how many notes it's gonna, like how big the QR code is gonna be based on the algorithm for the node selection. So just having node selection for that would be a little bit easier, but and yeah, the idea is to kind of just give a bit more like transparency and as far as like, here's what your wallet's actually doing. Here's how the notes are stored. Here's what the gateways are doing. Not all of it is maybe like, not all users will maybe even know what that info is for, but like if you want, you can go find it in our app. So, yeah, that's most of the features I'd say. Yeah, like I said, ecash.
What are your thoughts on like so like when an ecash wallet has like a lot of tokens in it, a lot of individual tokens in it, it like causes all sorts of performance issues. Is there a negative to like an easy consolidate button that just kind of like takes 1,000 tokens and turns it into 50 or something?
Yeah, potentially. We could talk about some of those trade-offs. So if you have fees on the mint, which no mints out there are collecting mint-based fees at the moment, but in the future you can imagine a world where they will. That kind of sucks. You're paying money to consolidate. It's like, I don't really want to pay money just to still have the same amount of money with a little bit less. So I think that's one of the major drawbacks. You also do kind of have like a very obvious timing footprint of like, here's all the ecash notes that I care about spending now. So stuff like that is not ideal, but
that's why manual consolidation has a bunch of timing risks. But like if there's an easy consolidate button that kind of, I don't know, like did it over time or something. There's and the fee thing makes sense to me, but also like we consolidate on Bitcoin on chain. In fact, to save on fees in the long term, which I think would probably be, if you were deliberate about it, would be a similar scenario. No, because I mean, mint fees could increase over time.
Not yet. That's a tricky technical problem. Maybe
fair
in
enough.
the future there would be
A lot of trick. So they can't. So they're just fixed at launch. Once you launch a Fedimint, you're not changing your fee structure.
As of right now, yeah. It's, again, that's where we get into the tricky consensus issues. We sort of have to deal with a lot of similar like software problems that Bitcoin has to deal with because we're a consensus system. And that's part of what makes us go a bit slower, like maybe in comparison to Cashu, because there's those challenges. But yeah,
I do want to circle back to your point though, Matt. I think it's excellent to consider just like the trade-offs. Like, yeah, it might be like a really small fee if you're paying like a SAT or something. And then now all of a sudden you don't have to, if you want to, go spend $100 worth of ecash, like you're not going to have a giant string of text or have an animated QR code that needs to scan like 150 little parts.
Because where you see it, it's because of Nostr. Like if in my day-to-day transactions, okay, people are sending me $5, $10, $20 or whatever. I'm going to I wish my farmer's market accepted ecash, but I'm going to the farmer's market. I'm paying $20 for steak or whatever. But like on Nostr, they're sending me 42 sats or 20 sats. And then you end up with like thousands of tiny amounts that always have to be constant. It's just like a constant challenge.
Yeah, our algorithm right now does try, when you transact, it does try to consolidate, but you still run into that situation. So,
and specifically, I think, and obviously, I'm more bullish on Nostr than most people, and it's still an open question of how successful Nostr will be. But specifically, both Fedimint and Cashu kind of solve that first problem in a very elegant way, which is like new user comes to Nostr and wants immediately to receive Bitcoin, doesn't have a Lightning node. Obviously, on-chain is not practical for that situation because they're receiving 42 sats. So I think if these projects are successful, that's going to be, it's either we're not successful or that's going to be a big problem. So just to point it out early is my point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay,
Can
awesome.
I do one follow-up real quick?
100%.
Sweet. On the previous topic of how do you know what mint do you want to join? Like, is there any rating system? So that's not currently in the ecash app, but there is a separate system, a different website you can go to, observer.fedimint.org. So this is an entirely separate system that Eric Sirian started to build out. I chipped away, making some contributions on as well. It's a really cool way to connect to a mint. And without getting too much into the nitty gritty, you can essentially scan the entire history of that mint and then observe everything that is observable for that mint from a third-party perspective. If anybody is curious about that topic in depth, I gave a talk at BTC++ Berlin last year that's on YouTube that you could take a look at the types of things that you can observe. But this also gives you a really nice way to explore, like, oh, look at the number of transactions that we're seeing on each of these different mints. What's the total number of assets and liabilities held on these mints? And then what's the rating system? So that's another cool resource that's not currently in the ecash app.
Observer.fedimint.org.
Correct.
Oh yeah, I'll put all these links there. I mean, I also think bitcoinmints.com is great because it has the reviews. That's obviously not Fedimint only. It also has Cashu mints in there. And that does bring up an interesting point that because Fedimint is on-chain native, you do get that additional data point of how much Bitcoin is actually in the multisig.
Totally. And on that point too, part of the consensus mechanism, whenever there's something being updated in the system, it will do a full audit. So, hey, let's take a look at all of the assets and all of the liabilities I have across this mint and make sure that my liabilities do not exceed the assets. If there is an issue with the accounting there, I'm panicking and everything shuts down. So that's something that the operator doesn't really know that they're doing, but each time that there's any type of update, there's actually a full audit that's run on the mints. And then other users, if they're curious, can essentially perform
But
that
then
same.
you're trusting the operator on the
Yeah,
liability
this is
side.
all, at the end of the
Like
day,
how
they can
many
always,
how much ecash is out there?
yeah, exactly. So people can play games. They can fork the software, and if they're clever, can do naughty things. And that's where reputation systems come in handy. And again, it's true, going back to kind of like, why would anybody want to use this system? And you explore the trade-offs. If that's a trade-off you're uncomfortable with, I wouldn't touch it. Like, that's totally
I mean, there's a lot of focus on the idea of just like one and done rug pull, but the scarier trade-off with both Cashu and Fedimint is like the silent inflation, like the slow rug pull. You're running like a fractional reserve for a while. Yeah, the office space protocol.
Yeah, that's kind of where Kali had that idea with like the automated bank runs, where you have like the window. I think that idea is cool. I'm not aware of anyone working on that, but that would be kind of the mitigation on the silent or the slow rug pull. But
no, but it still doesn't. I mean, look, it's better than, all these things are better than nothing. And I think you put all the pieces together and you have a relatively, particularly if you're using this as like using these as spending wallets, right? And not like life savings, which is how I think most people should approach it. It's like once you hit a certain amount, I think Zeus does a really cool job with this, actually like building it into their UX. Of once you hit a certain amount, then it goes out to self-custody. Whether that's Lightning. Ideally, I mean, in the Fedimint side, I think it'd be really cool if it just like in the ecash app or whatever the front end app is like, once you hit a certain amount, it prompts the user to put in an on-chain address and just sends out to an on-chain address. And if the user needs to reload it, they can always just send it back. Maybe even build an on-chain wallet directly into the app, and just you can kind of just make it one click, just goes into the on-chain self-custody portion. I think that is a pretty cool way of reducing risk. But like even it's long-winded, but even his like Cashu auditor thing, the round robin, it kind of doesn't, you can like fake it out. It's just checking to see if Lightning payments are going through in a reliable way. So you can fake it out for a bit while you're doing things. And then also, second of all, like it definitely does not stop like the one and done rug, where you can have like a Cashu mint that is awesome. It could be awesome for 5 years, and then it could hit a certain amount, and then the operator's like, nice, I'm going to go take a trip to Ibiza, and he's just out. And like, there's no way for you to stop that with the auditor thing.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah. I am not, I've never considered a way to solve those problems. They may be solvable. And
just mitigations. That's all.
Yeah. You can add a bunch of little pieces that like educates the user, allows them to make more educated decisions, reduce their risk. And I really like the idea of like building it into UX flow, like the balancing of like how much is in ecash versus how much is in on-chain or Lightning self-custody. I think that is, I think that could be like the holy grail of kind of the balancing act here. If you do it in a seamless way for the user, where they're not even really kind of considering how it's happening behind the scenes. They just like, okay, I got my checking account, and and maybe that's not even a good analogy anymore, because I don't know if Gen Z even knows what a bank account is. But like, I have my checking account and I have my savings account. And it's two separate pools of money with different trade-off balance. Okay, let's go to the operator side, because I think the biggest issue, I mean, Fedimint has, let's be honest, has had multiple issues in terms of organic adoption. I think partially has been the front end side, but I think probably, which is great to see another Fedimint focused front end with your ecash app get released. And the Mutiny guys were working on it for a while on the front end side. They got burnt out, pivoted to AI, which is actually not the worst thing in the world for us as users, because I really like Maple now. So all power to Tony on that. Two of them actually, they're making Harbor Wallet, which is going to be a Fedimint front end. I think it's out right now. I don't know. Yeah. I haven't tested it.
Yep. I think they had a 1.0 release. Yeah.
But have you tested it?
I have not. I have a friend that did though.
Yeah, so part of the release process testing that I do, I help coordinate, make sure that every time we cut a major release that we try to test as many scenarios as we possibly can. Part of that is downstream clients being able to easily integrate with any changes. So yeah, definitely spin up a couple VMs and have dedicated ones just for building Harbor and making sure the desktop client works well.
Yeah, that's harbor.cash.
I tested Harbor before the 1.0 release. Yeah.
So that's Paul and Ben from the former Mutiny team, I believe. I've been working on Harbor.
Yep.
While Tony pivoted to AI with Marks. But anyway, yeah, go on, Ben.
Let's go ahead and address some of the pain points, and then kind of the narrative, the arc of how we kind of got to some of the most recent changes.
Yeah.
What on the operator side, right?
Yeah, so definitely heard your feedback early on with Fedimint before you had even joined the project, and I was working at North American Centralized Exchange, being like, how cool that there's a system that isn't doing KYC and all these fun things, and you can deposit and send funds out of a system like this. But anyway, the setup of a federation was tricky. Let's talk about what a setup of a federation looked like just a couple of months ago.
It's fucking horrible.
Yeah, it's definitely it's an iterative process. Software is really cool. You start with a thing and like, oh crap, let's see if we can like shape this marble into something a bit more beautiful. And the initial setup process is tricky. So like in general, you have like a client server model is one way to think about this. Each of the peers, the guardians that operate this, are essentially operating a server that needs to be reachable on the wider internet. That's not great. You need a static IP address. Okay, now you have a firewall. You have to make sure that inbound connections are allowed within your firewall. Okay, let's go ahead and go to a domain name registrar and get a domain name. Oops, I chose a .xyz domain name. Okay, now we have this hard-coded domain name that will map how to connect to my specific server. Cool, like traditional web software, we've been doing this for decades. Like that is the common pattern, but that is not a very self-sovereign pattern of setting up stuff. And then there's also headache with the actual setup flow. Once you actually get everything set up and you try to do the DKG with your other peers to do the setup ceremony, a lot of back and forth that's kind of clunky. So there's definitely some pain points. Heard the concerns, and we worked quite a bit to iterate on that, make it a much smoother process. So let's also kind of fast forward a couple months after we launched. So, and when I say launched, it's like a mainnet supported version, which was officially 0.2.1, which was roughly like February of 2024. Well, fast forward about 3 months to May, and then you see certain folks that interact with Federation saying like, hey, I'm like something's off, like we're down, like I can't, like one of our peers is offline. And then well, what's going on there? Why is the peer offline? And then you do some investigation and it's like, oh my goodness, somebody was able to file some kind of abuse complaint without any verification and a .xyz domain. The registrar is like, yeah, we don't care, we'll just take it down. Like all of a sudden this previous assumption that it would take, almost like a state level attack to bring down a domain name is trivial. And that's a big bummer. So you're like, okay, well, domain name is not a good solution. So we have some quick workarounds to try to get everybody up and running again, which includes just essentially, here's an update system for this new, here's a new domain name, which you can reach my server at. Let's go ahead and broadcast this and people will figure that out. Is the quick fix in a nutshell. But that's not a long-term viable solution. And that hasn't solved any of the original problems when it comes to like, okay, this is kind of hard to set up. And also like, what if you use Starlink? Starlink is behind something called a CGNAT. CGNATs, you share a single IP address with everybody in your region. And so, sorry, buddy, you're not going to be able to have a static IP address that can be reachable on the internet. So what do you do for all of these different types of scenarios? Well, enter a really cool project called IRO. I won't give too much historical background, but essentially IRO was born out of the IPFS ecosystem, which is Filecoin, IPFS, really interesting experiments going on there. They were bumping into some boundaries of like, look, if we want to make it easier to establish like peer-to-peer connections anywhere on the internet, like we're hitting limits of what we can do without breaking IPFS. So we're going to go ahead and like freeze this existing project, spin out, and start like simplifying and focusing on how do we make it easy to connect to other people on the internet. And the approach that they ended up landing on is just a public and private key pair. So instead of using a domain name to look up how do I connect to the server, it's just a public key. That's really cool. They call that a node ID. And then there's some other technologies that we could go deep on, but to keep it high level, essentially it's like instead of like being blocked because you're behind a CGNAT or any kind of fancy firewall, how do we make it so we could still do some type of hole punching to establish a direct connection for different computers on the internet? Voila, they released this thing called IRO that for now we'll just say like magically solves these solutions, and we can go into those details. So longer term solution for Fedimint is like, how about we switch out our networking stack, or at least make a parallel networking stack where we, instead of doing just TCP and TLS connections that use traditional DNS and all the headaches we just discussed, what if we just integrate IRO? And so when you set up IRO, you get an IRO key pair. And then IRO automatically handles publishing that key pair that makes it so your node becomes discoverable. And then anybody behind other connections should be able to establish a connection to you. So I'll pause there. I can go into more details, or we can kind of do follow-up questions if
Yeah, I mean, specifically just to provide, I think that was a great rundown. Thank you for that. I mean, specifically, there was 2 large Fedimints that effectively had an unintentional rug because their domains got shut down, and there was a reliance on those fixed domains, and specifically it was the .xyz registrar that just like immediately honored whatever random spam list had put them on there, and it caused a whole slew of issues, both on the operator and the user side of trying to recover from that gracefully. What you're explaining to me is like, to me, the holy grail of getting something like this to work is making it as easy as possible for someone to effectively self-host a Guardian server. I mean, we talked about the reliance on DNS being an issue with like the .xyz registrar, but even more so, like you also need to have, a VPS provider, and you need to have a server in the cloud and whatnot. And that creates all sorts of friction. And it also creates all sorts of threat model issues for the actual operators in terms of how to operate it privately. So correct me if I'm wrong. Does this mean that we're close to someone just being able to like run a Guardian on a Start 9 at home privately?
Not only are we close, you can do it today. Yeah,
totally.
We have an S9 PK package that you can sideload on a Start 9, and then on Umbrel we're in the App Store right now. So if you have an Umbrel, you can install it. And yeah, the Brad's description of like the details is awesome, but from a operator perspective, you don't need to know like any of that. You just run it, and the actual setup ceremony, you're exchanging these strings. And the strings are essentially serialized versions of like how you connect to your other peers. And once everyone has the connection info, you just hit launch, and that's when it does the DKG. And if it's successful, like you're good to go. So the operating part is much easier. You can.
So you're just like copying. So you're launching it on your Start 9 or your Umbrel. Then you're copying, pasting strings between the Guardians through Signal or whatever.
Yep.
And then you press launch.
Yep.
That's it. Yeah.
That's clean.
Yeah, apologies, I'm not on Twitter, but if you do pull up the Fedimint Twitter account, there will be a screen recording that I made where there's 4 separate Chrome windows. I'm operating all of these on remote home servers that I'm using a mixture of Start 9 and Docker to do the setup ceremony. I do fast forward through the boring parts of like the copying, pasting, but you do get a gist that if everybody's online and available to communicate these things, you get a setup process done in about a minute or 2. Obviously, that's like optimistic case. There's communication and coordination, all that stuff. I'd anticipate it takes a wee bit longer, but yeah, it's a dead simple process.
Yeah, and In that too, we made a few changes to the actual DKG process, and the UI is all new as well. The UI is server-side rendered, so it's also a lot simpler. So kind of, yeah, IRO with the new UI and the DKG changes made setup just so much easier. I remember the first time like we did it like on Uninet dev setup, like we had 4 of us that were 2 on different continents, 1 behind a Starlink, and it just worked. It's pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
Well,
congratulations, guys.
Oh, thank you.
That's fantastic.
I would like to circle back to a statement you made, Matt, about it's kind of like the holy grail. I do not want to oversell IRO, but we're getting close.
That's my job.
Yeah, I'm not an IRO dev. I'm an IRO consumer and curious, excited fan. But my goodness, isn't that cool freedom tech to allow peer-to-peer connections pretty much anywhere on the internet? You could imagine all different kinds of use cases, not even just for chaumian ecash mints, but anything that's interesting to connect 2 different computers across the internet. It's dead simple. It's a couple lines of code to get that started, and you're off to the races.
I assume that's an open source project itself.
Open source project, and they're also, again, I sound like I'm a IRO shill. I'm definitely not paid by IRO. There's nothing going on there, but they're a beautiful open source project in terms of their communication style. They have a lovely YouTube channel with excellent explainer videos that are very well polished. Their documentation is excellent. Their thought process on roadmaps and making realistic expectations and adapting when they hit roadblocks, which is one thing we could discuss, because we were hoping to wait until they reached their 1.0 release, where a lot of these networking protocols have reached stability and there won't be any breaking changes that are introduced into IRO. We were anticipating that would happen like June or July roughly of this year. And then, software, so stuff gets complicated and it takes a lot longer than you'd expect. But they had a very clear look on 0.35. We will keep these stable. And then we're going to do this canary series for 0.90 that works our way up to this official final stable release. Don't play with that if you don't want to be building on quicksand. Stay on 0.35 and then you can upgrade to the official. So just in terms of like an open source project, communicating things beautifully to the community is they check a lot of boxes. So they're doing great. So again, it's not the magic bullet. It's a not a panacea, but it's a very cool open source project. I am heavily
we had most of this stuff on the Fedimint side. We had IRO pretty much fully integrated on our 07 release, which was back in like April. But as Brad said, we kind of waited some time to see what they were doing as far as their breaking change. They were going to do this breaking change. And we actually ended up integrating both versions so that we'll be like, if they do, because they're running some infrastructure that these relays that do the direct connections. And we didn't want to deploy an IRO version and then they would rug their version and say, well, we're not supporting that protocol anymore. So we're actually running our own relay as well. I think we default to their relays, but you can point it at ours too. So we
actually it does everything in parallel. So you are saying we're about to get into the nitty gritty. Matt, do you think it's worth getting into the nitty gritty?
Yes,
sure.
Getting into the nitty gritty. The freaks love it. Cool. It's not a good dispatch unless you don't understand over 50% of it.
Oh, we could go so deep on so many things. That'd be fun. So let's take a look at the perspective of what happens when an IRO node launches. So it's going to start. It's going to be like, okay, what's my goal here? Am I trying to accept connections, or am I going to be trying to send connections? And then let's go ahead and bind this thing. It's really just like 1 or 2 lines of code. And then when you do the bind method, there's a bunch of magic that happens. So when the application starts up, it's going to be like, okay, what relays am I aware of? What are those domain names that I can go reach out and ping and see who responds to me fast enough? That's going to be called your home relay. So anybody here, I'm going to do just a quick tangent into something that's called Tailscale. I'm not a Tailscale shill either. Definitely like a VC backed, to startup, you could get rugged, the free tier, all that good stuff. But a lot of the networking tricks that are played within IRO are also used within Tailscale. So it's like, how do I SSH to a home server when I'm on the other side of the planet? You can do something like Tailscale. But anyway, the fundamental design is very similar, where it reaches out to a home server, and then this home server starts publishing details of, okay, this is how you can look up this public key and figure out how to dial it. And there's a bunch of additional magic. You could say, go ahead and publish some details to the mainline BitTorrent DHT. Okay, let's go ahead and use some other services that are essentially just like glorified maps that map a node ID to some way that you can dial me. So when your client starts up, it's like, okay, let's see if I can check all of these different the different address books, essentially, like for this node ID. Let's see if I can figure out where this public key exists. So it reaches out to that home server, and the home server is like, I got good news for you. Here's how you establish a direct peer-to-peer connection. If that doesn't work out, which their goal is 90 to 95% of all connections will end up in a direct peer-to-peer connection. But let's say you still want to send packets and you can't establish that direct peer-to-peer connection, it will still be relaying encrypted data across that relay. So it knows the origin and the destination. However, it doesn't know the contents of the message that are being sent back and forth. So that's how you get this like very beautiful automagic peer-to-peer networking system.
What if that relay goes down?
Beautiful question. That's a central point of failure. And we're like, you know what? That would actually suck if we do all this work to integrate IRO and then something happens to their infra. So we also run parallel infra, and anybody can run parallel infra. So any other orgs out there, and I would anticipate that as IRO gains in popularity, different people will be like, look, we will operate relays. And
the clients will gracefully switch between them on failure or something?
Yeah, there's the discovery mechanism. So there's sort of two the relay is what helps set up the direct connection. And then the discovery part is how you sort of find the relay. So IRO has, I believe that the default is DNS discovery, but you can also use the PCAR discovery method or the mainline BitTorrent DHT. So yeah, that's kind of how you get around that.
That's awesome. I mean, I want to pull it back for a second on the Fedimint operator side. This IRO stuff seems awesome. And by the way, the freaks joining us in live chat, thank you guys for joining us in live chat. You guys make this show special and unique. And I love seeing a vibrant live chat. It's one of the reasons we prioritize live streaming within the Primal apps. If you want to join the live chat, you can do that through zap.stream. He has an iOS app as well, or on web, or any of the Primal apps, Android, iOS, web. There's a few other Nostr apps that also support the live streaming. Nostr is one, and Amethyst is another. Hopefully we will see more. And especially a huge shout out to the freaks who have zapped the show. One of them who zapped Lethal Lee was how I found out how IRO was spelled, IROH. He zapped 2100 sats. But I see a bunch of other zaps from other people here, including Great Gee with the top zap of 2121. So thank you, sir. I want to get back to the operator side. So when this DNS issue happened, some of the Fedimint operators, all of a sudden, they were in like a failure mode, right? And they needed to recover. So if someone's running a Fedimint on a start 9, what does that backup process look like? And what does the restore process look like? The start 9 burns up, right? The thing catches on fire. So how did I back it up, and how do I restore it? And
I was lucky enough to play around with a bunch of start 9 VMs and kick the tires to see all the different ways you can do this. It's a really cool system they have. So as part of the start 9 dashboard itself, there is an integrated backup and restore functionality in there. So if you want to back up your federation, all you have to do within the start 9 specifically is go to that, you back up, you select the Fedimint.
So if you just do a start 9 backup, it includes the Fedimint Guardian.
Yeah, if you're selecting all the applications by default. And then on restore, There's a nice little trick that we play where, and it's not a trick, but it's a DB snapshot. So you could, I'm going to, at the risk of blasphemy, it's not actually a blockchain, but you could almost conceptually think of some of the sequence of events within a federation as a separate chain. And the reason why it's not a chain is because there's no cryptographic hash that's pointing to the previous block. So it's be incorrect to make that statement. But anyway, we call these things sessions. And so you have a Genesis session, maybe a federation's been running for 2 years. It's going to have a ton of sessions. If you just need to do a normal restore, you're actually going to parse through all of those sessions again. And you're going to reach out to all your other peers that you're connecting to, the other guardians in the federation. And you'll be like, can you give me the session data? And you're just gobbling that up and parsing it and then getting back to tip, essentially.
You're like you're syncing.
You're syncing. Yep, you're doing an IBD essentially on the federation. What's nice about specifically the Start9 integration is we can go ahead and say, when you do backup, just save the state of our directory, our data directory. And then when you do the restore, go ahead and consider the most recent snapshot in our database, and we'll sync from that instead of needing to go back from Genesis. So then the backup restore process is significantly faster. However, as a failsafe within the Guardian dashboard itself, it's not necessarily a failsafe, but the default pattern across all the different deployments is you can just download a tar of your data directory. And so long as you have that file, you will be able to restore your single Guardian and reconnect all your peers and then sync from Genesis.
Got it.
So that's that is the backup restore process. Also, you're kind of dovetailing into with the .xyz domain failures that we were in a failure mode. That'd be a little bit different than specifically this backup and restore process. That Guardian could have just backed up and restored their specific Fedimint D, which is the daemon that runs the Guardian software. That wouldn't have changed anything. You need to define some other workaround in order to say, like, all right, I've updated my specific domain name and here's how you can reach me now. And then that got the system going.
Right.
However, it's a nice quick solution, but not a long-term elegant solution.
The IRO is this elegant solution. Yeah, for that part.
Well, I know that one of those, there was 2 Fedimints that had the XYZ issue. And one of them, like the funds have still not moved on chain because of backup failures.
That is interesting. That is news.
Like it was not your traditional rug. It was like the operators actually rug themselves. It donated to the entire Bitcoin community with Bitcoin stuck in a multi-sig due to
the config file that Brad mentioned is important, and that's exposed in the UI now. So making sure it's kind of that's the private key for the Bitcoin that's held on chain. So
but for like less technical users, a one-click Start9 backup sounds like a fantastic solution.
Yep.
Please go that route. If you don't know how to do a reverse tunnel over SSH, please just use a Start9. Like that is for you. Also, just real quick on that note, in general, if there was a federation where you noticed that style of failure, as long as you have if you have that config backup, there's something that we built called the recovery tool. So since this is just a multi-sig wallet on chain, technically that Bitcoin's not locked. There is a way to create a valid Bitcoin transaction that can move those funds out of the multi-sig. And that is something that if you go to GitHub and look at or reach out on Discord, I'm sure that somebody would be able to assist you with that process. And that's, those funds are not lost, but obviously the whole system of like, here's some ecash notes that I was hoping to not tell you, these were my ecash notes.
You have 2 pieces, right? You have, first of all, like the recovery of the actual funds on chain. And then second of all, the actual database of who owns what, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess one other thing to highlight with the IRO thing in regards to backup is that because IRO kind of provides this, your node is identified by the node ID, and it's not the DNS name or it's not the IP address or anything, that can actually, like, as long as you have the same node ID, you can sort of move your Guardian. So you can, like, if you wanted to, you could take down your Guardian, restore it on another machine. It will come. If you
That's
have that
cool.
config file, it will come up with the same public key, and you can just keep running like that. So it provides like easier migration technique. One other thing I wanted to mention on that is, you know, we've been talking about Start9 and Umbrel, and we also have a Docker image if that's where you're more comfortable, or Docker Compose file if you want to run that. But like, because Iro is pretty cool, like you can, because it's peer-to-peer, you can kind of run it on anything. So I have a project that actually moves the Guardian into a phone. I made a little Flutter app that you can run a Guardian like on an Android. It's like an APK that you can install and run a Guardian from your phone. So it would give you the same UI as what's in Start9 and Umbrel. And yeah, you know, I probably wouldn't recommend anyone doing that for production right now. It's kind of early, but the idea would be like, you could buy like a cheap phone or something, stick it in a corner on a charger, and run a Guardian just from your phone, because you don't really need to look at it that much. Like once you set it
Right,
up,
you would keep it like always on, connected to
yeah.
Wi-Fi. It wouldn't be like your daily driver phone that you're like walking around with.
Yeah, and with Iro, as you know,
That's
Brad,
cool.
I think it's kind of fun. I mean, you could imagine like a mobile mint where the whole mint is run off, say, 4 phones or something, and they're moving around or whatever.
They're on like USB power banks and like the Serengeti or some shit.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
very cypherpunk. But the
What is the like performance requirements? Is it very performant, or
for the phone, or just Fedimint in general?
yeah, like how shitty of a phone, how shitty of a device can you run a Guardian on?
I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's not
We
much.
got some min specs on our, if you go to our GitHub repo, you can take a look at that for the Docker setup. Android's a whole other beast. I don't even know how I would translate that. I have to just go kick the tires on like a Google Pixel 5 or something. But it's actually.
What would be the limiter? It's not storage, right?
Yeah, and compute-wise, it doesn't use much memory. I think it's pretty small memory-wise too. It might end up being storage at some point, because
as the mint gets more and more used,
you get more history. Yeah, again, I don't have numbers off the top of my head, but on the phone part, like Iro is really what makes that possible, and it uses like due to that like relay thing that Brad mentioned, it can sort of seamlessly like fall back from like a direct connection to over the relay. So if say your phone's moving around or something, and the network conditions change, Iro actually kind of is supposed to adapt to that. So another cool thing about Iro, yeah.
And I just pulled up our min specs. This is bare minimum for a 3 of 4. This doesn't translate to a 5 of 7 or anything else. There's more complexity, all that good stuff. But 1 gig of memory, 10 gigs of disk, and 1 CPU is bare minimum to operate a Guardian, which is not much. Like obviously, like I said,
no, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, pretty minimal. And then also we need to consider, a nice old Android that already has a UPS integrated with it and all these other lovely things. Like it starts to look kind of attractive.
Love it. I mean, while I have you, Brad, have you looked into like hole punch at all, like Keats stuff?
Oh, I've looked into hole punching, the technique to establish peer-to-peer connections, but not hole punch specifically that you're referring to.
Fair enough. I don't think it's open source yet, but it seems to be trying to solve a similar thing as Tailscale and Iro.
Yeah, the technique is the same essentially. Iro is just a library. It's a open source Rust library that we use. So technique's the same. Yeah.
Go on.
I was gonna say, for more context for the freaks, hole punching is referring to, so you have a router that you're on right now on your internet. Everybody's probably listening. Well, I don't want to make too many assumptions for mobile users, but if you're at your home network, you have a home router, and your router has something inside of it called a NAT, a network address translator. It's essentially like an internal mapping of a IP address internally to your LAN. to something that is used outside of your LAN. So when you pull up that 192.168.1. whatever, and you're like, oh, that's my IP address. It's like, yeah, that's your IP address inside of your local area network. That's not your IP address outside. So all of the fancy stuff with hole punching is saying like, okay, world, what do I actually look like from the outside world perspective? Because if you can figure that out, then you can figure out how to dial specifically an IP address with a port to reach this computer. And so there's a bunch of magic. There's a bunch of specs that have been worked on for decades at this point to try to solve that problem. And it still is like, there's a lot of complexities across different home routers just in the area of NATs that make this thing a very complex problem and unsolvable for a certain subset of NATs, but probably too much in the weeds. But yeah, hole punching in general is just solving what does my internal IP address actually look like to the outside world.
Yeah, Tor does hole punching too. Yeah.
First of all, I wanted to shout out that in the Primal Live chat, we have both Callie, the father of Cashu, saying Fedimint rocks, you guys are legends. And we have Eric Sirion, the father of Fedimint, saying you want at least 500 megabytes of memory. And that CPU isn't much of a limiter.
Right.
Unless you want to have multiple transactions. So that's cool that they're both joining us in the live chat. And then separately, Bitcoin Ranger zap 10,000 sats and use the default zap note of great post. Thumbs up. Thank you, sir. And then I see a question here about Signal being backdoored, which is completely random to our conversation. But if you want my opinion on it, I don't think Signal is backdoored. I think it offers you reasonable security guarantees with very good UX. And I think the way they usually compromise Signal is they compromise one of the phones of someone who's participating in Signal, and then they can read anything that's on your phone, including your Signal messages. So I think Signal's a good option for secure messaging. SimpleX is interesting. I think it's still pretty early. Threema is kind of interesting. You can obviously, there's a Nostr project called White Noise that is very, very early. That is not reliable yet. That will hopefully provide a good option there. The number one thing you can choose, by the way, when if you actually care about secure messaging, is using that auto delete feature on whatever client you're using, whatever app you're using. Delete after 1 week or delete after 4 weeks. Have that set so if someone's phone gets compromised, it only has 1 week of history or 4 weeks of history or whatever. That's the single biggest improvement you can make from my point of view. Obviously, the person you're talking to can still take a screenshot or a picture or something. So it's not protecting you from them, but it's protecting you for some external malicious actor.
And sorry, Matt, I almost interrupted you there. This is also pretty scary when it comes, if you have a smartwatch that connects to your device, and all of a sudden your threat model isn't just your phone, it's your watch.
What smartwatch do you have?
It's a Garmin.
The Garmin's are the better, like out of all of them is probably one of the better ones. That company is sneaky, relatively stayed true to their roots in terms of user privacy and security.
Totally agree. Once these get kind of old in life cycle and the auto updates with security fixes stop rolling, you're like, oh man, is somebody?
I'm a Casio man. I don't wear a smartwatch. No smartwatches for me. But if you're gonna get a smartwatch, Garmin is sneaky, like one of the best American tech companies. I'm a bit of a Garmin fanboy. Also, like if you don't want to use Google Maps anymore in your car, just get one of those like $400 Garmin units. Completely offline, stick it on your dash. Works like a charm. Okay, we got completely sidetracked. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm pretty excited. You guys got me bullish. You guys have made real progress.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Go kick the tires if you
Thank
got a
you,
Start
guys.
9 or an Umbrel, or you know how to do Docker. This is super simple to set up. If you actually wanted to play with MutinyNet before you have mainnet funds, also super simple to set up. Shout out Ben and everybody that does MutinyNet stuff.
I like testing on mainnet.
It's
Skin
fun.
in the game.
That's go experiment. Go play with the ecash app. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're very open to any bug
What's
reports.
the best way for them to provide feedback?
GitHub issues are great. We host multiple calls throughout the week. So if like this, I know this is a big lift if you wanted to join a call, but we're always available, almost like office hours for our weekly Monday dev call. All of this is on a public channel. I record it and upload it to bitcointv.com if you're ever curious. I'm sure some AIs are going to be parsing all of that, and that'll be very interesting in the future. But we also have a Tuesday review call where we go typically deep dive on a PR review topic. Sometimes it turns into just like a generic deep dive discussion on some technical aspect of Fedimint. Thursdays, we also have another time chunked out for deep dives. So all of those were available. We're on Discord. You can always hop in Discord, send a message. If you have a question, somebody will get back to you. But then, yeah, also good old fashioned GitHub issues is a really good way to get our attention.
Yeah, I'll make one more comment about the gateways. So with all the IRO stuff we talked about on the Guardians, we haven't yet done that with the gateways. So the gateways still have a similar requirement to what we had before with having a VPS and a public IP and a domain and stuff. That's something we're working on. We'd like to get gateways over IRO as well. We already have a LDK-based gateway. And so the goal there is to, make it so others can easily run gateways too. Idea like using LDK, or we have LND support too. So like the end goal is, say on a start 9, you could run a gateway against your existing LND node or with an integrated LDK node and provide liquidity that way. So that's coming. It'll take a little bit of time to do though. So
that's awesome. I mean, that reminds me. So you said the gateways need to be approved by the Guardian. How does that actually work in practice? You gotta, 3 or 4 Guardians set up. You want to approve a gateway. Is that a GUI thing, or is that are people doing it in the interface? Is that a command line thing? Like, how's that working?
Yeah, it's in the UI. There's if you run a Guardian dashboard, there's a little box to add a gateway there. And I don't want to get into details on that. We're sort of migrating our Lightning protocol right now to a second version. But you actually don't need to be vetted. There is a way to do it without being vetted, but those are sort of deprioritized because of the issue I mentioned before. So
all this is kind of that the Lightning Gateway stuff is going to change. It's kind of going to get deprecated and be a new method anyway.
It's we're deploying it out now. The detail, like the ecash app actually has support for the new version. Fedi does not yet. They'll hopefully upgrade it at some point. But yeah, if you like you said, if you deploy a Guardian, there's a little box in there for adding a gateway. So, and I'll mention, we actually do run a Fedimint official gateway. Again, the trust model is just that we need to trust the Guardian operators. So if you have a federation that you're running and you want some liquidity, you can reach out on Discord and we'll try to get you connected and set up using the official one. Yeah.
I see Archer Secured Consulting zapped 12,345 sats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sats for answering a signal question. So thank you. Thank you for supporting the show, sir. Okay. That all makes sense to me, guys. This has been great. I would love, maybe in 6 months or so to do a catch up on where the project stands. Have you guys back on, make it a little bit more of a recurring thing. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I mean, you guys seem to be making a lot of progress. A lot of things are moving, shaking.
That would be awesome. Would love to do frequent check-ins so everybody is kind of abreast of all the term we used, and I'm sure some folks are familiar with. At previous startups I've worked at, there's been a lot of sizzle and not a lot of steak. I'd say Fedimint, we got a lot of steak. There ain't as much sizzle as there could be. So hopefully these efforts will keep everybody kind of abreast of all the technical updates that we've been doing to make it easier to set up and interact with these things.
Love it. Well, great chat, gentlemen. Before we wrap, Do you want to hit the freaks with some final thoughts? I guess we'll start with Justin.
Yeah, final thoughts. Go to ecash.love to download the ecash app. Give it a try. Give us some feedback. And give a shout out to the Minneapolis Bitcoiners. We actually have a meetup coming up tomorrow, so I'll be there if anyone wants to chat. It's at the O'Shaughnessy Distillery in Minneapolis. Great venue.
That distillery is awesome, and that family is awesome. They're Bitcoiners.
It's we have like a private room for the meetup, which is amazing. They've been very generous to us. So it should be a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you guys, your meetup might have the best location in the country, and I say that as a co-founder of Bitcoin Park. So enjoy the meetup. And I saw someone ask when Odell. I brought Great Shame to my family that I have not been yet, but I will make it happen sometime soon. Brad, final thoughts.
Freedom money's cool. Freedom tech is cool. Being out in nature is great. Go enjoy your life, people.
Love it. Guys, I'm going to put all the relevant links that we talked about in the show notes. Next week, we have Seth for Privacy from Cake Wallet joining again on Friday the 26th at 1800 UTC. All relevant links are at citadel-dispatch.com. If you don't have sats to spare to support the show, sharing with friends and family really does go a long way. Leaving reviews, subscribing on your favorite platform. We're available in all the podcast apps. I see Lethal Lee just zapped 21,000 sats. Thank you, sir. He says, great rip, awesome project. Guys, pleasure. Keep crushing it. And I'm going to play around with some of the things you guys built, and I'll give you feedback myself. And don't hesitate to reach out if I could be helpful in any way.
Cool. Thank you.